Alrighty, I think we are all good and live. So, hi everyone. I would like to give a big, warm, fuzzy shift working welcome to the lovely Chloé Hannigan, who is joining us all the way from the United Kingdom and has, given her generous amount of her time to pop in and talk to us. I know that it's in the morning over there and it's at night here. So thanks so much, Chloé, for joining us. I'll give you a bit of a
You're
wave
welcome.
from
Thanks for having me.
a wave all the
Thanks
way
so much.
down. Yeah, so I'll just give a little bit of a spiel about Chloé, because just to sort of help everyone understand the reason why I'm actually bringing her on to do this talk with us today. But Chloé is a qualified vet from the Royal Veterinary College in London. She graduated in 2012 and has worked in mixed and small animal practices in the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. She's currently a small animal locum and loves the variety, teamwork, and surgical opportunities which her job brings, while acknowledging that sometimes veterinary medicine can be a very challenging profession to be a part of. And I can only begin to imagine how stressful that is. But she's also the founder of Vet Yogi, a membership site which provides yoga and meditation services to veterinary professionals. But I'll let Chloé talk more about that. But yeah, so thank you so much again for joining me, Chloé.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Well, I guess as a vet, I'm going to sort of throw into the shift working questions first, I suppose. But what sort of
So,
shifts do you do? I know that they sort of can vary over here with emergency vets and after hours and that. Is
mm,
that kind of the sort of because you do still practice, obviously, as a vet?
yeah, so it's completely variable, I think, depending on where you work and also what kind of work you're doing. So, as you mentioned in my lovely introduction, I have worked sort of all over quite extensively throughout the UK, Australia, New Zealand. I've also worked in the Cook Islands, and
Oh,
I've worked in a variety of mixed practice and small animals. So mixed practice is where you're doing your farm and your horses and a bit of everything. And so the shifts that you work um, does vary as well between the different type of practice that you're working in. So when I was doing mixed practice, for instance, especially when I qualified, it might be a little bit different now because they've tried to kind of get a hold of it for vets coming through, I think, because of the mental health issues and things that people were having. But certainly when I qualified, it was pretty common that you would work your day in practice and then you would do your night on call. So this is, you'd have the emergency dogs
ouch.
overnight.
Oh.
Yeah, and then quite often you'd be back in practice the next day as well. And then if you were working the weekend, you'd pretty much have the focus all weekend.
Wow.
So trying to juggle getting some rest in between calls, making sure you ate between calls, not knowing obviously when the phone could ring was quite a challenge in itself. And also, especially when you're newly qualified, when finding your clinical feet is quite stressful. Just learning how to actually get some downtime when you've got that phone with you and it could go at any point. That was a challenge in itself. And then I think in the small animal world, there probably are still some practices, especially like in rural places, that still have that sort of working the day and being on call system. Hopefully some of them will give you the day off after these days, but that's vary. But I think in
Yeah.
small animal now, particularly here in the UK, and I think also, when I was working in Australia and New Zealand, they also had the after hour emergency kind of vet clinics as well. So in the small animal side of things, it does tend to be like more of a shift that you do. So you'd either do like the day shift a variety of
Right.
time
Yep.
or the night shift. So kind of switched out that sort of working throughout the day and then having the on-call phone at night as well. That used to be quite challenging. And so as a locum, so obviously my main priority at the moment is running the business. So we do events, we go into practices to deliver workshops. We have our online subscription service that's quite busy. So I just locum around what's happening with the business. So I might be in practice a couple of days a week, or if I'm doing nights, I might do a little stint of a few night shifts in a row and then have a couple of weeks off to sort of focus on business. So it does depend as to which style of practice you're working in, the types of shifts you might do. But sort of a night shift in veterinary can be anywhere sort of 12 to 15 hours, really, depending on which site you're working at. So
Yeah, wow. Wow. And do you have a preference? Do you have much of a choice at the moment with your shifts?
Yeah, I suppose being a locum, it does give you more flexibility to sort of let practices know like what you have on offer. I do like I like working a mixture, to be honest with you, because I find that does work alongside what I'm doing with the business. But I find that what I try and do to kind of make it as straightforward as possible is like if I offer a practice that I'm going to do nights, I'll commit to kind of doing nights for maybe like those few weeks or that month, where I might be on a rolling kind of pattern. And then if I'm doing days, I'll just stick to days. So at the moment I'm doing days, and I'm just doing 2 to 3 days a week for one of my regular practices. But a few months ago I was doing nights for one of my regular practices, so I would do 2 to 3 nights a week, or maybe up to 4, depending on how much flexibility and time I had. I kind of let go of the days of doing 7 nights on. I just can't fit it in anymore. Like, it's not what I want to be doing. So
yeah, that's brutal, isn't it, when you're doing that many in a row? I remember doing I think 2 when I worked at the airport. I think I started like at 8:30 at night and went through to about 5 o'clock in the morning. And that just killed me. I remember back then. It's not easy. There's certainly things we can do to help with it, but it's certainly not easy.
I think the other thing as well is, like, apart from shifting your sort of clock, which I'm actually very much a night owl, so working nights is not a problem for me. Like, I'm fine. I'd always rather stay up late than get up early. Like, people always find that funny with a yoga teacher, because so many yoga teachers are morning people, but I'm such a night owl. But I think what people, when you're working shifts, because obviously if you're working nights or you're working weekends, or nights at weekends, you're kind of working outside of the status quo, aren't you? So I think when you are doing like a big block of nights or something like that, not only is it taking the toll on your kind of clock and your sleep or whatever, but it's also taking a massive toll on your ability to like socialize and contact your support network, because you're sleeping when they're awake and you're working when they're asleep, and so there's that aspect to it as well, where if you're doing too many nights in a row, like, it kind of, you sort of lose that contact, I think, with your support network.
Very good point. Yeah. Support work's probably the fellow people that you're working with, isn't it? Like, they're your family. They become your family for a while.
And I think in any high pressure job where you are working shifts, I'm really lucky. I think one of the major pros of the veterinary profession, I think by and large, the community is super supportive of each other. Obviously, there's always going to be outliers, but on the whole, I think it's quite an amazing profession to sort of work in. And you do form really strong bonds with your colleagues when you are working those like long shifts or those busy, sort of emotionally intense shifts.
Yeah. I would imagine so. I think anybody that looks after animals, in my book, are beautiful, compassionate people. And that I do realise that compassion fatigue is another element that your profession really suffers in, because of what you do as well. So I take my hat off. I take my hat off to you guys. I could not do what you do, but I have so much respect for what you do. So what inspired you to take up yoga, like, and how long have you been practicing?
It's a good question, and again, I think my answer probably doesn't fit in with what a lot of other yoga teachers say, but I first tried yoga when I was 16 and I thought it was rubbish. I thought it was a load of nonsense. I think teenager. The class I stumbled into, I was probably the youngest by about 30 years or something at 16, and I was playing so much sport. Like, I played netball, hockey, I was horse riding. It was very, very much like a busy time of life, and I thought I'd give yoga a go. And I think, just looking back on it, the style of yoga was just completely wrong for that stage of my life. So I kind of just dismissed it for a few years, and then I started coming back to it in my early 20s when I had a back injury through mixed practice. Actually, I mean, that's what you get when you're 5'3" and you think it's a good idea to try and wrestle cows for a living. So I kind of came back to it out of a bit of necessity, because having had the back injury and having to go to physio and all that, you sort of lose your sense of like invincibility that you have in your early 20s, because back pain, you know, anyone who's suffered with back pain or chronic pain can relate. It's pretty significant, and you know that you can tweak it at any time, so you need to start protecting it. So I went back to yoga, and luckily the teacher in class I found at that point, you know, was all good, and I started to sort of see the benefits. But at that stage, I'd probably say I was still just doing it like as a once weekly kind of thing, you know, going to a class. And then it was actually when I was working in Australia that I really started to get into yoga as more than just kind of a hobby. It became a big part of my life and how I look after myself physically and mentally, because sort of, as I just alluded to with shift work, you know, I moved to Australia by myself, with the time difference, it was, you know, sometimes if I'd had a really hard day, I couldn't contact my support network at home because they'd be asleep. So you're sort of having to find strategies to maintain your own resilience and process, you know, sometimes these really challenging situations that you've been in at work by yourself, essentially, until you can speak to someone. And of course, I made some amazing friends. I'm still friends to, you know, with a lot of the colleagues that I worked with in Australia and New Zealand to this day. But especially when you first start somewhere, you know, like until you've built those connections, you have to find ways of coping with it all yourself. And I think that's when I realized just how much I was leaning into my yoga and meditation practice. And that's kind of when I think the seed started to plant in my brain as to like how this could help my other colleagues. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of a wavy journey, I'd say, into yoga. But one that I'm very glad came to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's not many people that will do yoga and then they go off and do you know, yoga teacher training and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I know that. I know that that's not on my, even though I do yoga, it's not my thing. I'm like a tin man in yoga sometimes, particularly when it's cold. But you know, but it's all fun, isn't it? So yeah, all right. Can you explain to me what type or styles of yoga there are, and what some of your favorite ones, and why?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And, you know, thank you for highlighting that. I think I alluded, you know, the first time I tried yoga, it probably wasn't the right style for me. And I think when people are considering, thinking about yoga, they, you know, see all the people on social media in downward facing dog or warrior pose or whatever. And they have sort of an idea of what yoga is. And I think the first thing to probably say when we're talking about yoga is sort of in the sort of Western world, we often refer to yoga as actually just one limb of it. So yoga has 8 limbs as a kind of lifestyle and practice, and the movement aspect of it, or the asana, is just one limb. But that's where we tend to put all of our emphasis, you know, certainly here in the UK, and also when I was, you know, going to classes in Australia and New Zealand. So I think the way that we think about yoga is quite different to how it's probably considered, you know, in India and in the East. So, but even within asana, so we have lots of different styles, lots of different disciplines. So some of the words that people may have heard when they're looking at classes would be like hatha, which is the older style of yoga, the most traditional. That's kind of where modern yoga, as we think of it, comes from. And then there's vinyasa, which is the more sort of flowing style of yoga that a lot of people who kind of like to use yoga as part of their workout practice like, because it can be quite cardio based and strengthening, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong, a good hatha class could also give you a workout, but it just tends to be a bit slower and give you a little bit more time in each posture. Then there's yin yoga. Yin is a completely different style where stillness is the key, and you're holding the poses, or in yin we call them shapes, so you're holding them for several minutes at a time with supports like bolsters and blocks, and so it's a very restful style of yoga. There's restorative yoga, which can be really good for people with injuries or who are looking to incorporate yoga as part of their journey from like healing, maybe from trauma, and that's very unstructured. It's kind of like yin, but even more yinish, if you like, in the fact that you're not trying to increase your flexibility, you're just trying to be supported and get in touch with your parasympathetic nervous system. There's yoga nidra, which is the yogic sleep, which we can talk about a bit later. I know we're probably going to come to sleep.
That sounds good.
Kundalini is it's a very energetic focused practice, breath focused practice. There's Ashtanga, which is a very sort of structured way to practice. You move like through specific postures all the time. I mean, I think people have probably heard of Bikram. I'm not going to speak about Bikram. It's not for everybody, but you know, it's not a traditional style. It's quite a modern style. But honestly, that there are so many different disciplines and branches of yoga styles that people can try, and I think that's one of the key messages that I try to, you know, put forward to my vet community, the wider community, that there is always a style of yoga for everybody. Like, you just maybe haven't found your style if you first try it and are not super keen on it. But the other thing about having all the different styles is that it really does make it sort of more holistic practice, because so for instance, I'm qualified to teach hatha, vinyasa, yin, yoga nidra. I teach obviously meditation and breath work and pranayama. If I'm feeling really low on energy or I'm really tired, I know that I can do yin. I've got yoga nidra there if I need it. If I feel like I need to have an energy boost, or I feel like I'm, you know, need to work through some frustration or something, then I've got vinyasa and hatha if I need it. So it's nice to have the variety and have something on offer for kind of different stages of life, different energy levels, different stages, particularly for women, of like your menstrual cycle, for instance. So being able to tap into all of these different styles when you need them is really helpful.
I've just made a note there for taking out frustrations to choose a vinyasa and a hatha class. So if I'm having a day, you know, whatever, I go, where's that on the yoga schedule? I need to go boom into that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it'll get you out your head and into your body.
yeah, and I love that you explained that so beautifully, Chloé, because I remember when I first started, I didn't even know what was what, and it can be a little bit intimidating, and you sort of feel a little bit out of your depth or whatever when you're first going for the first few times, because we're also, because sometimes you can be close, you sort of feel like you want to compare with the person to the mat before, and like that's obviously the worst thing to do. You just kind of go and do your own thing. But do you also do, because I noticed that at my yoga studio that I go to, they're just starting to do what they refer to as like foundational yoga, which is basically going through the basic moves. And I've actually been going to that and found it so useful, because we develop really bad habits while realizing, oh my God, I've been doing yoga for so long and I'm doing it completely. You know, we go in the mirror and we do the pose the best that we can, but you know, she's really good at sort of aligning us. And do you do that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, well, I think so. To be honest with you, alignment's really important in most styles that you practice. The only styles that it's not super important, it would be like restorative and yin, where you're really focusing on support and you know, using those props. So we let go of alignment as a focus in yin and restorative. But in hatha and vinyasa and iyengar, so that's another style that I didn't mention, but one that I really love. Iyengar is an amazingly alignment focused style of practice, where you can use props like chairs and things and blocks, but you're really focused on aligning your body in a way that's right for your proportions. And so I think when people are talking about sort of foundational yoga, where you're taking a bit of time in the poses, that's most likely probably going to be a hatha based class. I mean, I might be wrong, but that's probably, you know, if I was teaching complete beginners and I'm wanting to teach them poses in detail, it would be a hatha that I would go back to, because we're going back to the root of yoga. It's a foundation. So yeah, but I think I think I have a bit of an advantage in a way, and one thing that's really important for like the community that I teach, which is primarily vets, some medics. Obviously, we're all very highly trained in anatomy and physiology.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
to teach our community, you have to know what you're talking about anatomically. And so I think I do have a little bit of an, being a surgeon, I do have a bit of an advantage, I think,
Bit of an edge.
when it comes to the anatomy side of yoga and teaching, and being able to, help people with alignment and help people if they have, certain issues or injuries and things. But even though I'm a vet, I'm not a human doctor, so I'm always very, very pro people seeking out advice from their own physician, their own doctors or healthcare professionals if they have issues.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, of course. Actually, yeah, totally, totally. Well, so with yoga, the reason why I wanted to get you on as well, obviously with your medical background and so forth, and your shift working background, is that what I love about yoga is that it is a beautiful way to calm the nervous system. And as you know, personally, shift workers are very frazzled. Their nervous systems are always in that fight or flight response because of the disruption to their circadian rhythms and so forth. Can you, and if it was me, I'd love to have yoga studios, every shift worker as a part of their employee well-being to be signed up to go. I do. I just value it so much. Can you sort of shed a bit of light on that, as how it actually does help to calm our very, very frazzled nervous systems?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important, and something that we work with, certainly with my colleagues a lot as well. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a conference giving a talk on how breath work can actually calm our nervous system and how we can use it in practice. So this is something that I really, really like to share, because I think it's often a bit overlooked when especially if people are new to yoga and they think yoga is just stretching. As I said earlier, yoga as a whole is actually 8 limbs, and breath work is one of those limbs. So pranayama is the 4th limb of yoga, and meditation is also one of those limbs in dhyana. So bringing all of that together with the movement and with the other aspects of yoga is really important. And when we're working shifts, as you said, in our fight, flight, freeze mode, quite often, so that is our sympathetic nervous system that is in overdrive there. And our sympathetic nervous system, when it's overstimulated, will do things like increase our heart rate, increase our respiratory rate, increase our cortisol levels. It's as you said, it's getting us ready really to be able to run or fight, or some people have a freeze response. So it really means that our body is kind of in activation mode. And one of the key parts of that is in our brain, there's an area called the amygdala, which is our sort of internal alarm system. And I think people always use the analogy that, back in the day, our amygdala would be firing up, and our sympathetic nervous system would be firing up to like protect us from, saber-toothed tigers and things. Like it was a response to danger. So it wasn't something that's meant to be continually activated. But I think in modern life, with how busy everybody is, juggling work, shift, kids, family, friends, all the things that we want to be in life, being constantly connected on our phones, not maybe having as much downtime as we would have done in the past, our sympathetic nervous system is just sort of constantly firing up, particularly when we're working jobs that require, that are often stressful. So a lot of the time our cortisol levels are high, and they're not really coming back down, and we may find it difficult to regulate our breathing. A lot of us are stuck in sort of shallow breath, and we can have all these short-term effects of that, like, as I say, a higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, higher cortisol, disturbances with sleep. But we can also have like really serious long-term effects from shallow breathing, like postural changes, our respiratory muscle fatigue, the excessive cortisol that stays in our system for a long time can interfere with our other endocrine systems, our hormonal systems, for instance, which is particularly important with women. And it's something that, if our bodies are constantly ready for go, we can become triggered by things that our body recognizes as unsafe. But even if our rational mind knows that we're okay, the effects that we're having through our nervous system in our body, because we're pattern recognizing this system as being stressful. So let's take an example. You know, you might have a client who is being rude to you at work, for instance. Now, 9 times out of 10, you know, at work, you're going to be perfectly safe in that situation. You know, you're not going to come to harm in that situation, but your nervous system is amping you up to be able to sort of deal with that situation, because they're recognizing that client as being unsafe.
Yep.
And then the more that you're dealing with those kind of situations, the less it takes to trigger us into those responses. And then we suddenly find that actually we're constantly wound up, and trying to wind down at the end of the day or trying to regulate ourselves during our shift becomes more and more difficult. So this is where we can use practices like yoga, meditation, breath work to center ourselves and get really present in our bodies, try and get out of our heads. Because I think most of us, and myself included, like, I teach this stuff and I still have to find myself sometimes in the middle of a shift being like, no, come on, like, take a deep breath. Connecting to that breath work, it's about making that shift from our sympathetic overdrive into our parasympathetic nervous system. So allowing that rest and digest mode to take back over, allowing our bodies to catch up with the fact that we're safe, allowing our minds the space that it might need. You know, so many people are suffering with anxiety in the modern world. And I think we've all had that incessant internal chatter that we just don't seem to be able to switch off. So going to these tools, whether you're doing like a faster movement-based practice or you're sitting down to try and meditate and just take some deep breaths, anything that tries to get you out of your head into your body and connecting to your breath it's a really powerful way to try and encourage that parasympathetic nervous system to activate. And one of the main ways that we do that is with our 10th cranial nerve, our vagus nerve. So you may hear people talking on social media about vagal stimulation or activation to try and help us get into that parasympathetic state. And that's kind of what we're going for with the breath work or with yoga.
Yeah, brilliant. And I know that personally, I've started to feel a lot calmer, actually, the more that I began to practice yoga. And you're right, when dare I say it, the shit hits the fan at work, so to speak, you feel like you can sort of deal with it a bit better. It's hard to explain. Yeah, I know that was definitely something that I personally got out of it. I sort of started to feel like I was sort of turning into a bit of a different person, a lot more calmer at work. And yeah, the thing is, as you so beautifully pointed out, when we are working shift work is hard enough, but when you've got even a more high stress job, it's like a perfect storm, isn't it? So yeah, so obviously then that has a flow-on effect to sleep.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you spend all day, they may feel stressful to us, but we carry that stress in our bodies way after the event has finished. So we may have dealt with that interaction, we may have dealt with that emergency or whatever it is, and in our minds we've moved on, but our bodies haven't moved on because it's been triggered to, you know, activate all this fight, flight, freeze response. And so it's no wonder then when we do clock off, you know, and if you are working shifts, you might be coming home at like 8 o'clock in the morning to try and get a good rest or good sleep. And that's a whole other issue with light and our circadian rhythms that, you know, I'm sure people are aware of. But when you are trying to come home to sleep and you've had this elevated cortisol, you haven't had access to deep breath, you've been stuck in shallow breath, your blood pressure might be higher, your heart rate is higher, you can't switch your brain off, you know, of course we're not going to be able to then just slide down and instantly go to sleep when we need to. So I think building routines, and actually, as a person, I've struggled with routine. I'm very much the sort of person who likes to have variety every day and like sort of not know what I'm doing. But I did really find when I'm working nights, the value of having routine. I mean, I think a lot of it's out there as like sleep hygiene stuff, you know, trying to have something that you do that when you clock off your night shift, for instance, and you're coming home in the day, in the morning, a pattern that you follow that can help you to ground yourself in your current situation, be more present with your mind, body, and breath. So if it's coming home, maybe, you know, cooking food, or if you're really organized and you know you're working shifts, maybe you batch cooked, so you've got something in the fridge you can just warm up or whatever. That's always a good idea. Cook, you know, eating, having a shower, so you're physically like rinsing that away. That can be quite a nice way to like wash off what's just happened. And then having like a little practice that you do, even if it's just like 15 minutes of yoga, or maybe like a 10-minute meditation or something, that you can then start to wind yourself down. Maybe it's reading a couple of chapters of a good book, like whatever it is, just setting yourself up so that when you finish that shift, you're kind of doing the same thing, so that your body's getting used to knowing like, okay, now we're safe. Now we know what's coming next. You're giving your brain time to kind of power down, and you're giving your body a chance to go from activation mode to relaxation mode.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a particular yoga pose that you recommend, or a meditation app, or something that you would recommend for our listeners as a way to help with that transition? Is it something that you do? I mean, I know that there's the leg up the wall kind of pose, which is great for people that have sort of been on their feet all day. Is there any that you would particularly recommend, particularly for newbies out there that might not have done, you know, just starting out as yoga? But I love, that is exactly what we need to be doing, because as you said, in order to sleep, it's not like a light switch, unfortunately. It's not this on-off switch. It's a bit of a process that we've kind of got to work to. So having that little routine is great. But is there perhaps a couple of poses that you would recommend, or even a meditation app that you would recommend for people to sort of help with that?
Yeah, so I think obviously legs up the wall is a lovely one if you have been on your feet all day, because it's going to help with venous return, lymphatic drainage. It's also very calming for the nervous system. I think, you know, rather than sort of recommend sort of one pose, because it'll depend on people's kind of flexibility levels or what they're able to do. But I just think as a general group, forward folds are really soothing for the nervous system.
Okay.
And they can also release a lot of tension from the lower back and the hamstrings, back of the legs. So anything where you're forward folding, like whether you're doing a standing forward fold, you're doing maybe ragdoll, or a seated forward fold. And if you are super tight, you can sit up on a block or a bolster and really fold into it. Or, I mean, extended child's pose is a classic one. You know, it's a lovely pose to allow you to sort of rest the forehead. And I think anything where you can get a little bit of pressure kind of at your third eye center as well can be really soothing. And poses that allow you to open up areas where we carry a lot of tension. So the nice thing with extended child's pose is you're getting into the hips. We carry so much tension in our hips because we have our massive hip flexors there, our psoas muscles, our quads. These are, you know, prime muscles for our fight or flight response. They need to be activated if we need to run away or if we need to fight. So when we're stressed and, you know, and our psoas comes all the way up to our T12, so insertion near our diaphragm. So all this breath and our musculature is linked, and our soft tissues, our fascia, it's all linked in ways that are so fascinating. But it is really helpful to then, you know, stretch and relieve tension from these big muscle groups that will be storing that tension for you. So hips, lower back, shoulders. I think shoulders often come up. So any pose that's really going to help you get into those key areas. And I do love the forward folds. And in terms of you know, apps and stuff, well, I would be remiss if I didn't say, you know, we have our Vet Yogi Collective subscription service. So we have a lot of classes on there of all different styles and different durations, anything from like a couple of minutes all the way up to 90 minutes. A lot of our content obviously is for the veterinary community, but we also have content that's suitable for everybody as well. And a lot of the classes are kind of transferable. If you are doing shift work, you probably, you know, would benefit still from our classes that are sort of aimed at vets and nurses that are working shifts. So
Sounds
One of
great.
my favorite practices for sleep is yoga nidra, and it's the yogic sleep. And the good thing about this is you're just lying down for the whole duration. You're just in shavasana. It's very little effort. The only thing that you need to try and do is not fall asleep during the practice. And the nice thing with yoga nidra is it's a very guided, structured style. It's very deep relaxation, but your teacher, the person guiding you, is giving you the visualization, that it's giving you the body parts to connect with. So it's good for people who might struggle to just sit down and sort of feel like they need to kind of empty their mind. I mean, how hard is that after a shift? So having something where your mind is kept busy, yeah, your mind is kept busy. And the fascinating thing with yoga nidra, like as you know, someone with a science background, they've done some really interesting studies looking at yoga nidra with people in MRI machines whilst they're, you know, undergoing a yoga nidra meditation, and it really shows like with the electrical testing that they did on people's brains, yoga nidra practice will help take you out of your alpha and beta brain waves down into your theta and maybe even delta. Yeah, if you're you know, the more experienced you get and the easier you are to drop in, but taking us out of those kind of alert, and it's not always bad to be alert, you know, sometimes we need to be in our more alert brainwave state, obviously, but actually helping us drop into our theta state, our theta brainwaves, is a really powerful thing to do, because that's encouraging the full body to then start to enter that relaxation state. So because of this effect, they've actually shown that like 1 hour of yoga nidra can be as restful as 4 hours of non-REM sleep.
Wowzers, really?
Yeah. It's really powerful stuff. And so if I'm feeling tired, or I'm feeling drained, or I'm feeling like I don't have enough time to rest, maybe I've had a bad night's sleep the night before, yoga nidra is something that I always have there to fall back on, as a little restorative. It's like a break, really. It's a break for the body and it's a break for the mind. And it's just like with anything, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And this is something I always try to get across to my colleagues as well. You know, whatever job you're in, if you're shift working, whether you're in medicine, veterinary, caring, maybe you're working hospitality, like whatever it is that you're doing, you wouldn't expect yourself to be able to do everything perfectly on day one of your job. You know, I don't expect my students or our new graduates to be able to do a dog castrate perfectly on day one. They need, you know, they need supervision, they need help, they need practice. And it's the same with our yoga and breathwork practice. The more that you can practice doing it, especially when you're feeling quite good, you know, maybe you're having a good day and you can get to a yoga class, you're already starting from a position of sort of neurological calmness, shall we say, the easier it will be to reach for these tools when you are feeling physiologically, psychologically stressed. If the only time you ever try to do yoga is when you're really amped up, you're probably not going to get the most out of it. Whereas if you try to actually practice this and bring it into your life during good times as well, it's like anything, the more you work it, the easier it gets, so that when you are in those really stressful times, it becomes easier to reach for it, and your body and your mind are practiced in engaging with it and in helping you to relax and wind down. So this is why I always call yoga a practice, because we're practicing it physically, but we also need to practice it as we would with any other skill or any other aspect of life to not get better at it. It's not about necessarily being better, but it's about having these tools and being able to access them when we really need them. But in order to do that, we need to be practicing them when we feel safe.
Yeah, great tips. Yeah, really, really good tips there, Chloe. I love that. And I guess one of the other things I think people to keep in mind is by just making that choice and that decision to go to a yoga class, which is say usually an hour, that is you, you know, dedicating an hour to yourself. And even if you don't end up doing a lot in the yoga class, you end up, as you say, spending a lot of time in child's pose or shavasana or something like that. It doesn't matter. You're there. You're giving your body the opportunity to rest. out of that outside world. So that just leads me on to, I know I'm a bit mindful of your time here, just a couple more questions before we wrap up. So what would you say to the newbie person out there that's never done yoga before? They're sort of a little bit scared at the idea that they have to kind of, rock on in this, got the designer yoga gear on, and you have to be super flexible and all this kind of stuff. What advice do you give? I don't know, maybe you've got one or two little tidbits of advice to the newbie out there when they first go in and try a class.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing, let's deal with the flexibility, because I hear this all the time. And first of all, let me just start by saying, like, you do not need to be an Olympic gymnast to practice yoga. Like, you do not need to already be flexible. Yoga will help with flexibility, but we also need to get away from this idea that like flexibility is the end goal of yoga, because there's so many more benefits for our health. I mean, don't get me wrong, flexibility is an important part of fitness, but there's so many more benefits that, it doesn't have to be the end goal that you end up doing the splits or being able to do a handstand or whatever. And one of my favorite quotes around this, and I've never actually been able to find who originally said it, so I don't know, but I don't take credit for it myself, but it's one of my favorite ways to kind of frame it, is when people say to me, I'm too inflexible for yoga, that's like saying you're too dirty to take a shower. Like, that's when you most need it. If you're already inflexible, doing something that's going to help with your flexibility is going to be hugely beneficial to help you avoid injury. We practice yoga so that when we bend, we don't break, basically. Whether that's mentally or physically,
or a bit of both.
Yeah, I think trying to get away from this idea of having to be flexible in order to do yoga, because I certainly was not, when I first started all those years ago. I was dealing with a back injury. I could barely touch my knees. I had shoulder injuries from sports I used to play and work, and even now, compared to and this is the thing, we shouldn't compare ourselves, should we? But it's human. We all do it. Compared to a lot of my veterinary colleagues, I'm very flexible, but compared to all my yoga teacher friends who just teach yoga and that's their main job, I look like the Tin Man. So it's there's no point in comparing yourself to anybody else. And trust me when I say, like, if you're at a yoga poses that are requiring your attention, no one is looking at you, because everyone is just trying to focus on not falling over themselves. I think can you hear me still?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you just dropped out a little bit there. Yep. Or it's a little bit dodgy.
Am I back now? Yeah. So basically saying, like, no one is focusing on other people when they're trying to, like, not fall over themselves or get in touch with what they're trying to do. And don't be afraid, if you're a newbie, to like try a few different teachers. You might find a teacher that you really connect with.
Great tip.
Try a few different styles. There's loads of free stuff online as well. As we have our membership service, but we also still have some stuff up on the YouTube channel, Vet Yogi.
Okay, we're back in again. We just had a little bit of a glitch there. We lost Chloe for a little bit, but we're just we'll wrap up shortly.
When you're working shifts with dodgy Wi-Fi, honestly.
That's how we feel as a shift worker, really, isn't it? We kind of like on and off all the time.
Yeah, we take a deep breath and we come back to it and we just get on.
Totally. Totally. But I think too, you're also sort of saying, like, don't worry about comparing about what everyone else is doing in the room, because we're all very different. We've done so
I think also not comparing with yourself, and I'm really guilty of this, and it's something I've got better with. I think we're working shifts and things, like if you're working high pressure jobs, you tend to be a bit competitive maybe with yourself, or like pushing yourself, and I think, it's perfectly fine as well, just because, especially, and I do mention women and cycles a lot, because actually, especially for shift workers, it's really important that we're sort of honoring whatever stage of your cycle, whether you're sort of in your menstrual cycle or your perimenopause or in menopause. Honoring what's happening hormonally in your body is really important as well. And So for instance, when I'm in my follicular phase of my cycle, whatever, I've just had my period, I feel lots of energy, I feel really strong. This might be a good time for me to be doing like vinyasa, hatha, strong classes. If I'm coming up to, when my period is next due, I'm in my luteal phase, I'm feeling probably quite sluggish, I'm maybe having some mood swings, a bit of PMS, whatever. Maybe my body is feeling tighter and more restricted than it would at other stages. That's a really good time to like nourish yourself with some yin or some slower practices. So, not even competing with yourself. Like, what's the point in comparing yourself at different stages of life or your day? Like, just try and focus on what you can do in that moment. It doesn't matter if you can't do what you did in practice last week. At that time, just showing up is half the battle. But I think it probably cut out when I was saying one of the really important things as well that I tried to get across for like our busy community who are working shifts is yoga doesn't always have to be a full hour. I mean, obviously, if you're going to a class, that's great. But the key things that come out with the studies for the benefits is regularity and consistency. So even if you're just doing like 5 or 10 minutes a day, but you're doing that, often enough, you'll still get the benefits versus doing, an hour or two a week or whatever. So if you find the prospect of starting yoga a bit daunting because you just don't know where you're going to fit it in, instead of having to think, right, I'm going to have to set aside this hour every week or whatever, try and build in a bit of meditation, a bit of yoga, even just 5-10 minutes into your day at the end of a shift, at the start of a shift, whatever it is that you want to do. Getting away from this idea that yoga has to be this set thing for this set amount of time. You really can build it in around what you're doing and make it work for you.
That is gold. Absolutely gold. I love that. Yeah, because we're always we don't want to add to the stress or pressures of of people when they're busy and so forth. I love that. So just little bite-sized micro kind of big bursts of yoga.
Yeah, because you don't want it to just become something else that you have to do, right?
Exactly.
It's not another chore in life that you have to do. So that's why, in our subscription service, we have a whole section called yoga moments, and they're all 5 minutes or less. And they're sometimes like full body classes, or they might just be little breathwork moments or little guided meditations. And it's just helping people to build it in to their day. Or we have classes that are 10 minutes, 15, 20, half an hour. You get the idea. Like we're trying to give people whatever they have to fill. So it's trying to reframe how we think about it, how we think about our self-care. It doesn't always have to be a super set scheduled thing. I mean, it can be if that's what you're into, but it can also just be something that we actually allow ourselves,
Brilliant. Oh, this is so good. And also, so I've got to mention too that I love how you were mentioning about from a female perspective with the hormonal thing, because you're exactly right. Sometimes we're like kind of a bit of an energizer bunny, if that really does exist as a shift worker. But feeling better some days and not so good the rest. Just listen to the body. So so good. Thank you, Chloé. And just to kind of to wrap up, just could you sort of share a little? I know you have shared a little bits and pieces. Thank you so much about your own membership with your vet yogi, but could you just sort of share a little bit more for anybody that might actually be interested as well within our membership that might be keen to join? Because it's and my ears certainly pricked up when you were mentioning about the short little bursts, because that's a brilliant idea.
So it's called the Vet Yogi Collective, and it's a subscription-based membership which we can provide for individuals, but we also work with businesses, practices, organizations who might want to provide it as a benefit to their team, as a way to support them in their shift work. So if there's anybody out there who's thinking, how can I help my employees? Is there something I can give them that's more than just a box ticking exercise, but something that's actually going to help them to build, healthy habits, like long-term habits? We work with businesses as well to try and facilitate that. And so members will have access to all of our on-demand content. We just launched this year actually in April, so we're just constantly adding content all the time. So it's a really exciting time to kind of get in there. We have class durations, like I say, all the way from a couple of minutes all the way up to like what you'd more, your full 60 to 90-minute classes. We have lots of different styles on there. There's a couple of different teachers. So a lot of it obviously is me as a founder, but we do have other teachers on there as well. And that's something that I'm looking to build more and more too, so that people get access to different teachers and more styles. But yeah, we have all the styles that I basically teach on there. So we have Hatha, Vinyasa, Yin, Yoga Nidra, we have meditation, we have all the breath work, pranayama. We also, our membership does include a monthly live class as well, just so that you do have something that you can set at the moment, if you want to join. But obviously just being mindful that probably most of your listeners are in Australia, that's something that we're looking to do. At the moment, our sort of membership in Australia and New Zealand isn't big enough for me to be able to justify putting on live classes for
3 a.m. for you.
Yeah, but hopefully, as we grow, that is something, because I'm committed, to be honest, we're looking to grow in Australia and New Zealand at the moment anyway, because I have such lovely ties to both of those countries. I've worked there, I've worked in multiple practices all over both of those countries, and we want to help colleagues kind of worldwide, really. So as we grow, it'd be something that we'd be looking to do, actually, building in live classes at times that suit our Aussie and Kiwi friends as well. But for the moment, we've just sort of got them on the UK time zone, but all of our live classes are recorded and added as new content for the next month. We also have some benefits for members. We work with other small businesses who provide sort of mutual discounts and things. I accept that they're probably more beneficial for veterinary people, but we are looking to add more and more things as we grow. And as I say, we have content on there for all the different roles within veterinary, but part of that is having non-clinical people there as well. So we have classes that are just suitable for everybody. We have features where you can select like what area of the body you want to work on, or like what intention for your class is.
Good idea.
So it kind of, well, yeah, because when you finish a shift, like you've already been making tons of decisions all day or all night. The last thing you want to do is get that paralysis of like choice, So if you come home and you're thinking, right, I'm tired, my feet hurt, what shall I do? You can put in, that you want something gentle, you want to rest, you want to work on your feet, and then something should
happen.
Yeah, and it just take out that decision-making process. So, there's less fatigue, hopefully. So you don't end up with that Netflix effect of like, God, what are we watching or what are we doing, So we've tried, and obviously we're adding more and more stuff all the time. Like each month we let our members know what new content we've added, and we try to add a variety of things so that people can stay engaged and try different things. So yeah, I mean, it's quite new. We've only been up 6 months or whatever, so I'm also very open to feedback. People can always get in touch if there's something that they want to see on there. We want to work with people to provide them with like valuable tools that they can actually use.
Yeah, excellent.
So, anyone check it out at our website, vetyogi.com. There's the collective tab up there. I'm sure, Audra, that we could work something out, a little discount for your members. We can set that up. So if anybody's interested, they can get in touch. You can email me, Chloé at vetyogi.com, if you have any questions about yoga. Or the membership, whatever. I'm always happy to try and point people in the right direction. I still try to point myself in the right direction a lot of the time, but that's the nice thing about yoga. It's a lifelong learning journey, I think.
Love it. I love it. That's brilliant. Well, I'll make sure to pop the links to your websites and so forth down below. That's good. And thank you for mentioning about the discount and so forth. So yeah, if there's anybody watching that is keen to join, that where they can reach out to you. And I know that you are on some social media channels as well. because I've been stalking you on Instagram, just saying.
Yes, I have to. We are on all the social media: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Oh, and YouTube. You said you've got a YouTube channel as
YouTube,
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's some
Yeah.
classes on YouTube. TikTok, I'm not really as active on there, to be honest. Yeah, we try to keep people up to date with social media, with what we're doing. I must admit that when I'm busy, social media is one of the things that drops down a bit on the priority list. But it is lovely to be able to connect with people on there, so people can always, follow us and reach out with the DMs. That's lovely. So yeah, give us a follow and we do try and post things, tips and things to help people. But I must admit that I do try and practice what I preach. And when I'm talking about shift workers and, not maybe spending as much time on social media, like I also try to do that myself when I'm feeling low on energy and things. And so it doesn't always translate to like a super active presence on social media, but we do our best.
Yeah, totally. And particularly with what you do, I mean, you're juggling so many different things with your conferences and everything. Like I said, I take my hat off to you for what you're doing. But look, this has been I've absolutely enjoyed our conversation so much, Chloé. You've a wealth of wisdom from a shift working perspective, as well as a yogi perspective, as well as a healthcare practitioner perspective, to our furry and four-legged friends and those that have scales and trunks and all sorts of different types. But I know that I've gained a lot from our conversation today, and I'm sure that our listeners will as well. And I just wanted to say thank you so very much for coming on and talking to me in the morning for you over there. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for asking such, interesting and insightful questions. It makes it a lot easier when, we're trying to talk specifically about shift working and how challenging that can be. And I think from the veterinary perspective as well, I think one thing I just leave people with, I'm so privileged I get to work with animals, like, my day in, day out. But we could also learn so much from them. I think if we could learn to kind of be present and not carry things forward with us the same way that dogs and cats do, like, they're a bit of a reminder every day to try and like be happy, live in the moment, and like not take things on with us. So yeah, I'm very, very lucky that I get to combine both of my passions, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I remember doing a talk at a veterinary clinic down in Sydney, I think it was. And once I did the talk, I had to kind of run out. So, is there any cats? Is there any kitty cats that I can give a cuddle to? And I'm so jealous you get to pat these critters every day. It was, you are very lucky for that. And I think every person needs to own a pet as well too, isn't it? That alone is also good for the nervous system. Someone to hug, a furry critter to hug.
I just don't think we deserve animals. It's definitely a bonus of the job. But yeah, I think, it's a real privilege to be in this position where I'm helping colleagues as well with their mental and physical health, because we do have very concerning rates of mental health problems within our community. So it's not all cuddling puppies and kittens, unfortunately. It can be quite challenging. And I just feel very lucky that I've been able to kind of create this role where I've brought both of my worlds together. I've got my sort of scientific and my slightly more spiritual sides, and just locked them into a business. So it's very lovely to be able to come on and speak to people like yourself as well, who are doing such good work for shift workers. So thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'll definitely be talking about you a lot for sure. That is it's wonderful. All right, I better let you go because I know that it is a different time zone. So I will look forward to speaking to you and stalking you a little bit more on social media as well. So
maybe let's try and have a catch up. Let's try and have a catch up at some point, maybe in the new year, because the rest of the year is just manic. But it'd be nice to be able to touch base and maybe just have like more of an informal chat, see how you're doing. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing and that kind of thing. So
yeah, sounds great. All right, thanks, Chloé. I'm just going to hit the stop button now.